Hi, I'm Natalie. 3 months ago, I sat in family court listening to my ex-husband Derek tell the judge that I was mentally unstable and unfit to have custody of our children. He had coached Tyler and Chloe to repeat lies about me, painted me, as an erratic woman who couldn't provide stability. What Derek didn't know was that the judge presiding over our case was Patricia Winters, my former law partner from 15 years ago. And what he definitely didn't know was that I had been secretly recording every conversation we'd had about the kids for the past 8 months. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light filtered through the gauze curtains of my small apartment in Beaverton, Oregon, casting soft shadows across the hardwood floors I'd grown to love. It had been 18 months since Derek and I finalized our divorce, and honestly, those months had been some of the most peaceful I'd experienced in years. No more walking on eggshells, no more analyzing every word before I spoke, no more pretending that his constant criticism was somehow helpful. Just me, my freelance graphic, design work, and every other weekend with Tyler and Chloe. That particular Tuesday started like any other. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open, working on a logo design for a local bakery, when my phone buzzed. Derek's name flashed on the screen, and immediately my stomach tightened. Our communication had been minimal since the divorce. Was finalized, mostly limited to logistics about the kids' schedules through a co-parenting app the court had mandated we use. Phone calls were rare, and when they happened, they usually meant something was wrong. I answered on the third ring, keeping my voice neutral. "Hello, Derek." "Natalie, we need to talk." His tone was clipped, businesslike, the same voice he used when he was about to deliver news he knew I wouldn't like. In our marriage, I'd learned to brace myself whenever I heard that particular inflection. "What about?" I asked, minimizing the design file on my screen and giving him my full attention despite myself. "I'm getting married." The words hung in the air for a moment. I felt a strange mix of relief and something I couldn't quite identify. Relief because this meant he was moving on, which hopefully meant less drama for everyone involved. The other feeling took me a moment to recognize. It was actually happiness for him, which surprised me. "Congratulations," I said, and I meant it. "That's wonderful news. The kids will be excited to hear you're happy." There was a pause on his end, like he'd been expecting a different reaction. "Her name is Amber. She's a nurse at the hospital where I make calls. We've been together for about 10 months. I did the math quickly in my head. They'd started dating just 2 months after our divorce was final. Part of me wondered if they'd been involved before that. But honestly, I found I didn't care enough to pursue the thought. That chapter of my life was closed. "I'm sure she's lovely," I replied. "When do you want to tell Tyler and Chloe?" "Actually, that's the other thing." His voice shifted, became more formal. "Amber got a job offer in Phoenix. It's a significant promotion, head of pediatric nursing at a children's hospital. The opportunity is incredible." My hand tightened around the phone. "Okay, that sounds like a great opportunity for her. We want to move there, together, this summer." The kitchen suddenly felt smaller. "Derek, Phoenix is over 1,000 miles away." "I'm aware of the distance, Natalie." "What about your custody time with the kids? What about your every other weekend schedule?" Another pause. "I want to modify our custody agreement. I want to take Tyler and Chloe with us." The words hit me like ice water. "Excuse me?" "Think about it rationally. I can provide them with better opportunities there. Amber makes good money, I'm doing well in pharmaceutical sales, and the schools in Phoenix are excellent. Plus, Tyler's getting to an age where he needs more structure, more masculine influence in his daily life." I stood up from the kitchen table, pacing to the window that overlooked the small garden I'd been cultivating. The tomato plants I'd put in with Chloe just last month were starting to show tiny green buds. Derek, they live here. Their friends are here. Their schools, their whole lives are established here in Portland. Kids are adaptable. They'll make new friends. And when would I see them? Christmas and summer vacation? Every other major holiday? My voice was rising despite my efforts to stay calm. We could work something out. Maybe they could visit for a month in the summer. A month. After raising them every day for 12 and 8 years respectively, he was suggesting I see my children for 1 month out of the year. I pressed my palm against the cool glass of the window, trying to steady myself. Derek, I'm not agreeing to this. The kids need both their parents actively involved in their lives. Look, Natalie, I didn't want to bring this up, but you've been struggling since the divorce. Living in that tiny apartment, working from home all the time, barely making ends meet with your little design projects. The kids have mentioned that you seem sad a lot. That stopped me cold. What do you mean they mentioned I seem sad? Tyler told me you cry sometimes when you think they're not looking. Chloe said you don't cook real meals like you used to, that you order pizza more often. Then you should. I'm concerned about the environment you're providing. Each word felt like a small knife. Yes, I had struggled those first few months after the divorce. Yes, there had been nights when I'd cried after putting the kids to bed, grieving not just the end of my marriage, but the family structure I'd thought we'd have forever. And yes, I had relied on takeout more than I liked during those early months when just getting through each day felt monumental. But I'd been healing. I'd been building a new life. I'd been learning to be happy on my own terms for the first time in years. Derek, adjusting to divorce is normal. I've been going to therapy, I've been working on myself, and I've been creating a stable, loving home for Tyler and Chloe here. I'm not questioning your love for them, Natalie. I'm questioning whether love is enough when you can't provide the same opportunities I can. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Derek outlining his plans and me expressing my objections. By the time we hung up, my hands were shaking and I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I immediately called my best friend Kelly, who worked as a paralegal downtown. He can't just take them, right? I asked her after explaining the situation. I have joint custody. He can't just decide to move across the country with my kids. Kelly's voice was careful, measured. Nat, he can petition the court for a modification. If he can prove that the move would be in the children's best interests, and if he can demonstrate that you're not providing adequate care or stability. But I am providing adequate care. I'm providing love and stability and consistency. I know you are, but Derek's always been good at presenting his case. You're going to need a lawyer. A good one. That night, after Tyler and Chloe were back at Derek's house, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea that had long gone cold, staring at my phone. I knew I needed to start documenting everything, keeping records of our conversations, tracking the kids' well-being when they were with me versus when they were with him. I'd heard enough stories from other divorced friends to know that custody battles could get ugly fast, and that the parent who was better prepared usually had the advantage. What I didn't know was just how ugly Derek was willing to make things. What I didn't anticipate was how far he would go to paint me as an unfit mother, or how systematically he would begin working to turn my own children against me. The first sign came the following weekend when Tyler and Chloe returned from their dad's house. Usually, they burst through my apartment door full of energy and stories about their weekend adventures. This time, they seemed subdued, almost cautious. "How was your weekend, guys?" I asked, helping Chloe out of her jacket. "Fine," Tyler mumbled, not making eye contact. "Just fine? Did you do anything fun?" Chloe glanced at her older brother before answering. "We met Amber. She's really nice. She has a big house." "Oh, that's exciting. What was she like?" "She's pretty," Chloe continued. "And she said we could each have our own rooms in Phoenix. Really big rooms with whatever decorations we want." I felt a chill run down my spine. Derek was already selling them on the move, already planting seeds about how much better their lives would be in Arizona. That sounds lovely, sweetie, but you already have your own rooms here, and you've decorated them exactly how you like them. Tyler finally looked up at me, and there was something in his expression I'd never seen before. A kind of guarded assessment, like he was studying me. Dad says you might not be able to take care of us much longer anyway. The words hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean, Tyler? He said. Tyler glanced at Chloe, then back at me. He said you've been having a hard time since the divorce, and that sometimes adults need help when they can't handle things on their own. I knelt down to Tyler's eye level, my heart pounding. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Tyler, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I am absolutely capable of taking care of you and your sister. I love you both more than anything in the world, and there is nothing that would ever change that. If you're ever worried about anything, you can always talk to me directly. Okay? He nodded, but that guarded look didn't leave his eyes. Over the following weeks, the comments became more frequent and more pointed. Chloe mentioned that Amber was a nurse who helped sick. People get better, and wasn't that such an important job? Tyler asked why I worked from home instead of having a real job like other moms. When I served them spaghetti for dinner one night, Chloe commented that Amber made homemade bread and that Dad said cooking from scratch was better for growing. Kids. Each comment felt like a tiny paper cut, small enough to seem harmless on its own, but collectively creating a constant stinging pain. I realized that Derek wasn't just planning to petition for custody modification. He was systematically undermining my relationship with my children, preparing them to see me as inadequate so that when the time came, they might actually want to leave with him. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening in March. I had picked up Tyler and Chloe from school and taken them to their favorite pizza place as a special treat. We were sitting in our usual booth, and I was listening to Chloe tell me about her art project when Tyler interrupted. Mom, are you taking medicine? I paused, a bite of pizza halfway to my mouth. What kind of medicine, honey? Dad asked if you take medicine for being sad or angry. He said sometimes divorced people need special medicine to help them think clearly. The restaurant suddenly felt too loud, too bright. Other families were laughing and talking around us, living their normal lives while mine felt like it was crumbling in slow motion. Tyler, I don't take any medicine like that. Did Dad tell you I did? Tyler looked uncomfortable. He said he was just wondering. He said he wants to make sure we're safe. Safe. Derek was planting the idea that I might be dangerous, that my mental state was questionable, that their safety could be at risk when they were with me. I looked at my 12-year-old son, seeing the confusion and worry in his eyes, and realized that Derek wasn't just fighting for custody. He was waging psychological warfare, and he was using our children as weapons. That night, after I'd tucked Tyler and Chloe into their beds and read Chloe her bedtime story, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and began writing down everything I could remember. Every comment the kids had made, every conversation with Derek, every instance where I felt like information was being twisted or manipulated. I also made a decision that would change everything. I downloaded a call recording app on my phone, legal in Oregon as long as one party consents to the recording. From that point forward, every conversation I had with Derek about the children would be documented. I had no idea that this decision would ultimately save not just my custody case, but my relationship with my kids. What I also didn't know was that Derek had already filed his petition to modify custody and that I would be receiving official court papers within the week. The real battle was just beginning, and Derek had already been preparing for months while I'd been trying to heal and move forward with my life. But sometimes the universe has a sense of justice that operates in ways we never expect. Sometimes the very thing that's meant to destroy us becomes the catalyst for our ultimate vindication. And sometimes the people from our past show up at exactly the right moment to remind us who we really are. I was about to discover all of these truths in ways I never could have imagined. The legal papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I signed for the thick manila envelope with hands that barely trembled, though my heart was racing. Inside, Derek's petition for custody modification was typed in cold, clinical language that somehow made our family's dissolution feel like a business transaction. Reading through the documents felt surreal. Derek's lawyer had painted a picture of me that I barely recognized. According to their filing, I was financially unstable, emotionally fragile, and potentially neglectful. They cited my modest income from freelance work, my isolation in working from home, and my adjustment difficulties following the divorce. They even mentioned that I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment rather than a house, implying that this somehow made me less capable of providing for our children. But the most painful part was a section titled Children's Preferences and Welfare Concerns. According to the petition, Tyler had expressed to his father that he felt worried about Mom's mood changes and that he preferred the stability of his father's household. Chloe, they claimed, had mentioned feeling uncertain about Mom's ability to take care of things and had expressed excitement about new opportunities and a fresh start in Arizona. I read those words 3 times before the full impact hit me. Derek hadn't just been undermining my authority with subtle comments. He'd been building a legal case, using our children's confused responses to his leading questions as evidence against me. Every casual conversation, every moment of doubt or worry that Tyler and Chloe had expressed had been twisted into ammunition for this petition. The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks away, which gave me barely enough time to find a lawyer and mount a defense. Kelly recommended Marcus Rivera, a family law attorney with a solid reputation and experience in complex custody cases. When I met him at his downtown Portland office the following week, he was direct about my situation. Derek's petition is comprehensive, Marcus said, reviewing the papers I'd brought him. He's presenting a strong case for why relocation would benefit the children, better schools, more opportunities, stable 2-parent household with higher combined income. The challenge is that courts often view relocation favorably when the moving parent can demonstrate clear advantages. But what about my relationship with the kids? What about keeping their family intact? Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. Natalie, I need you to be completely honest with me. Have you been struggling since the divorce? Have there been any incidents where your parenting might have been less than ideal? I thought about those first few months after Derek moved out. The nights when I'd ordered pizza because I couldn't summon the energy to cook. The times I'd cried in my car after dropping the kids off at school, overwhelmed by the magnitude of rebuilding my entire life. The weekend when I'd been so exhausted that I'd let Tyler and Chloe watch movies all day while I dozed on the couch. I had an adjustment period, I admitted. The first few months were hard, but I've been going to therapy, I've been building my business, and I've been creating a stable home for Tyler and Chloe. They're happy when they're with me. Can you prove that? Do you have documentation of your therapy sessions, evidence of your business growth, records of the children's activities and achievements while in your care? That's when I realized how unprepared I was. Derek had been building his case for months, maybe longer, while I'd been focused on healing and moving forward. I'd been living my life while he'd been strategizing to take my children away. I can get those records, I said. But Marcus, there's something else. Derek's been coaching the kids, manipulating them into believing negative things about me. I've been recording our phone conversations about the children. Is that something we can use? Marcus raised an eyebrow. Oregon is a one-party consent state, so those recordings would be admissible. What kind of things has he been saying? Over the next hour, I played several recordings for Marcus. Derek questioning whether I was taking medication for depression. Derek asking Tyler if I seemed overwhelmed when they were with me. Derek suggesting to Chloe that some moms just aren't good at taking care of themselves, let alone children. Derek's voice, calm and reasonable, planting seeds of doubt about my capabilities while positioning himself as the concerned, responsible parent. Marcus's expression grew increasingly serious as he listened. "This is parental alienation, Natalie. It's a form of emotional abuse, and courts are becoming more aware of it. But proving it can be challenging because the alienating parent is usually careful to avoid direct accusations." Derek's being subtle here. "Not always," I said, remembering a conversation from the previous week. There was one call where he was more direct. I found the recording and played it. Derek's voice filled the office. "Natalie, I'm concerned about your mental stability. The kids have noticed that you're not yourself lately. Tyler mentioned that you forgot to pick up Chloe from soccer practice last week, and that's not like you. Maybe you should consider getting some help before this custody hearing. I'd hate for the judge to think you're not capable of handling the responsibilities of primary custody." The recording continued with Derek suggesting that I might want to voluntarily agree to his relocation request rather than putting the children through a contentious court battle. His tone was concerned, almost caring, but the underlying threat was clear. Marcus stopped the recording. There it is. He's creating problems and then positioning himself as the solution. This is textbook manipulation. He paused, making notes. "Natalie, I need you to understand that this case is going to get ugly. Derek's clearly been planning this for a while, and he's going to pull out every weapon he has. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Tyler's suspicious glances, about Chloe's comments comparing me unfavorably to Amber, about the way my own children had started to seem uncomfortable around me. Derek had already been waging this war for months. I was just finally ready to fight back. "I'm prepared," I said. "What do I need to do?" The next few weeks were a blur of documentation and preparation. I gathered financial records showing that while my income was modest, it was consistent and growing. I collected testimonials from clients praising my work and reliability. I requested records from Tyler and Chloe's schools showing their academic performance and attendance, which had remained excellent during their time with me. I got letters from their pediatrician, their teachers, and the parents of their friends, all attesting to their happiness and well-being. But the most important evidence came from continuing to record my conversations with Derek. As the court date approached, his comments became more direct and more damaging. He started asking the children pointed questions about my behavior, then relaying their confused responses to me as evidence of concern. "Tyler mentioned that you seemed tired last weekend," Derek said during one call. "He said you took a nap on Saturday afternoon. That's not like you, Natalie. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you taking care of yourself?" What Tyler hadn't mentioned to his father was that I'd taken a brief nap because I'd been up until 2 a.m. finishing a major project for a client, or that we'd spent the morning hiking and the afternoon building a fort in the backyard. Derek was taking isolated incidents and weaving them into a narrative of decline and instability. In another conversation, Derek expressed concern about Chloe's comment that we'd had just sandwiches for dinner one night. He wondered aloud if I was keeping up with proper nutrition for the children. He didn't mention that the sandwiches had been part of an indoor picnic we'd set up in the living room while watching a movie, complete with homemade cookies and fresh fruit. Chloe had thought it was the most fun dinner ever, but Derek had transformed her innocent comment into evidence of inadequate care. The pattern became clear through the recordings. Derek would ask leading questions, take the children's responses out of context, and then present his concerns to me in a way that seemed caring but was actually accusatory. He was building a case not just for the court, but in the minds of Tyler and Chloe themselves. The most devastating recording came 2 weeks before our court date. Derek called, ostensibly to discuss logistics for spring break, but the conversation quickly shifted. "Natalie, I think we need to have a serious Discussion about what's best for the kids, he began. I've been talking to them about the possibility of moving to Phoenix, and they're more excited about it than I expected. Of course they are, I replied. You've been selling them on it for months. You've been telling them how much better their lives will be there. I've been honest with them about the opportunities available. That's not the same thing as manipulation. Isn't it? Derek, you've been systematically undermining my relationship with them. You've been coaching them to see problems with me that don't exist. There was a pause, and when Derek spoke again, his voice had changed. The veneer of concern was gone, replaced by something colder. The problems do exist, Natalie. You're just too unstable to see them clearly. Tyler told me yesterday that he's worried about you, that you cry more than you used to, that you seem different since the divorce. Chloe said you get confused sometimes, like when you forgot about her school picture day last month. I had forgotten about school picture day, a fact that had mortified me and led to Chloe wearing her regular clothes instead of the special outfit we'd picked out. It was a simple mistake, the kind every parent makes, but Derek was using it as evidence of my incompetence. One forgotten school event doesn't make me unfit, Derek. It's not just one thing, it's a pattern. The forgotten pickup, the takeout dinners, the mood swings, the isolation. The kids have noticed all of it, and frankly, so have I. Maybe it's time to admit that you're not handling single parenthood as well as you thought you would. I'm handling it fine. The kids are happy and healthy and thriving. Are they? Because Tyler asked me last week if all divorced moms cry as much as you do. He wanted to know if it was normal for moms to seem sad all the time. What was I supposed to tell him, Natalie? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been sadder those first few months, grieving not just the end of my marriage, but the future I'd thought we'd have as a family. But I'd been healing, growing stronger, building a new life. The fact that Tyler had noticed my sadness and interpreted it as something wrong with me, rather than a natural response to a major life change, showed just how effectively Derek had been poisoning their perception of me. You could have told him that divorce is hard for everyone, and that it's normal for people to feel sad sometimes when their family changes. You could have told him that I'm working through those feelings and that I love him and Chloe more than anything in the world. I could have, Derek said, and there was something almost triumphant in his voice. But maybe the truth is that some people just aren't cut out for this. Maybe the truth is that Tyler and Chloe would be better off in a stable home with two parents who can provide for them properly. Two parents? Derek, I am their parent. I've been their parent every day of their lives. You've been their mother. But lately, I'm not sure you've been a very good one. The line went quiet for a moment, and I realized I was holding my breath. Derek had finally said what he'd been implying for months. In his mind, I wasn't just an obstacle to his relocation plans. I was an inadequate mother who needed to be replaced. The kids deserve better than this, Natalie. They deserve stability, opportunity, a real family. Amber loves them already, and they're comfortable with her. Tyler told me he wishes she could be his stepmom officially. Chloe asked if she could call Amber Mom once we're married. Each word was calculated to inflict maximum damage, and Derek delivered them with surgical precision. He knew exactly how to hurt me most effectively. The idea that my children might prefer another woman, might want to replace me with someone they'd known for less than a year, was almost too painful to process. But even through the pain, I recognized what Derek was doing. He was manipulating not just the children, but me. He was trying to make me doubt myself so thoroughly that I would give up without a fight. He wanted me to believe that I was the problem, that my love wasn't enough, that walking away would be the selfless thing to do. Derek, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I will never voluntarily give up my children. If you want to take them away from me, you're going to have to convince a judge that it's in their best interests. And I don't think you'll be able to do that. We'll see, he said, and hung up. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that call, staring at my phone and replaying Derek's words. The recording app had captured everything, including his admission that he'd been coaching the children to prefer Amber, his acknowledgement that Tyler and Chloe's comments were responses to his leading questions, and his clear statement that he considered me an inadequate mother. But beyond the legal implications, I was grappling with a more fundamental question. Had Derek always seen me this way? During our 12-year marriage, had he been cataloging my shortcomings, waiting for the right moment to use them against me? Or was this cruelty something new, born from his desire to start fresh with Amber and eliminate the complications of shared custody? I thought about the early years of our marriage, when Derek had praised my nurturing nature and my dedication to our family. I remembered him telling friends that I was a natural mother, that Tyler and Chloe were lucky to have me. But I also remembered subtle criticisms that had grown more frequent over the years. Comments about my housekeeping, my cooking, my tendency to be too emotional about things. Had those been early warning signs of the contempt he was now expressing so openly? It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was protecting my relationship with Tyler and Chloe and proving to the court that Derek's accusations were not only false, but part of a deliberate campaign to alienate them from me. The week before the hearing, Marcus and I met to review our strategy. We had documentation of my stability, evidence of the children's well-being in my care, and hours of recordings demonstrating Derek's manipulation tactics. But Marcus warned me that the case was far from certain. Derek's presenting a compelling argument for relocation, he said. Better opportunities, higher income, stable two-parent household. The judge will have to weigh those advantages against the importance of maintaining your relationship with the children. What about the parental alienation? What about the recordings? They're powerful evidence, but judges are sometimes reluctant to find alienation unless it's extremely blatant. Derek's been careful to frame his comments as concern rather than direct attacks on you. I thought about the most recent recording, where Derek had been less careful about maintaining his facade of concern. There's one conversation where he's pretty direct about his opinion of my parenting. Marcus reviewed his notes. That will be crucial. If we can show the judge that Derek's concern is actually contempt, and that he's been systematically undermining your relationship with the children, it could change the entire case. There's something else, I said. I've been looking at the court docket and I saw who's been assigned to our case, Judge Patricia Winters. Marcus nodded. She's got a solid reputation. Fair, thorough, doesn't tolerate games in her courtroom. I know her, I said quietly. We were law partners about 15 years ago, before I left to focus on raising Tyler and Chloe. Marcus looked up sharply. You have a personal relationship with the judge assigned to your case? We were colleagues, not close friends, but yes, she knows me. She knows my character, my work ethic, my values. Is that going to be a problem? It could be. Either party can request a different judge if there's a potential conflict of interest. Derek's lawyer will probably ask for a substitution once they find out. What if they don't find out until we're in court? Marcus studied me carefully. Natalie, are you suggesting we not disclose your prior relationship with Judge Winters? I'm not suggesting anything unethical. I'm just saying that if Derek's lawyer hasn't done their homework, that's not my responsibility. The truth was, I felt a small flicker of hope for the first time in months. Patricia Winters knew me as I really was, not as Derek was trying to portray me. She'd seen me navigate complex legal problems with intelligence and integrity. She'd witnessed my dedication to my work and my colleagues. If anyone could see through Derek's manipulation, it would be Patricia. But I also knew that our prior relationship could backfire. If Patricia felt obligated to recuse herself or bend over backwards to appear impartial, it might hurt my case more than help it. The ethical thing to do would be to disclose the relationship and request a different judge. The strategic thing to do was to stay quiet and hope that Patricia's knowledge of my character would influence her perception of Derek's accusations. In the end, I decided to trust that Patricia would handle any potential conflict appropriately. If she felt our prior relationship was problematic, she would recuse herself. If she felt she could be impartial, then maybe, just maybe, justice would have a chance to prevail. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, looking through photo albums of Tyler and Chloe. Pictures from their first steps, their birthday parties, their school plays, family vacations. 12 and 8 years of memories, of love, of the daily routine of raising children who were the center of my universe. I thought about Derek's accusation that I wasn't a good mother, that the children would be better off without me. I thought about all the ways I'd failed to be perfect. The forgotten school events, the nights when exhaustion made me impatient, the times when my own sadness had cast a shadow over our home. But I also thought about the countless bedtime stories, the scraped knees I'd kissed better, the homework I'd helped with, the dreams I'd listened to and encouraged. No parent is perfect, but love, consistency, and presence count for something. Derek could offer Tyler and Chloe material advantages I couldn't match, but he couldn't love them more than I did. He couldn't know them more intimately, couldn't be more invested in their happiness and well-being. As I finally headed to bed, I made a promise to myself. Whatever happened in court, I would fight for my children with everything I had. I would not let Derek's manipulation define me or my worth as a mother. And I would trust that the truth, presented clearly and honestly, would be enough to preserve the family that Tyler, Chloe, and I had built together. The morning of the hearing dawned clear and cold, with that sharp February light that makes everything look hyper-focused. I dressed carefully in my navy blue suit, the one I'd worn to job interviews back when I'd practiced law. Looking in the mirror, I saw someone I hadn't been in years, professional, competent, ready for battle. Marcus met me at the courthouse steps, carrying a briefcase full of documentation and evidence. "Remember," he said as we walked through the metal detectors, "stay calm, answer only what's asked, and trust that the truth will come out." Inside courtroom 3B, Derek was already seated at the petitioner's table with his lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Rebecca Hayes who looked like she specialized in high-stakes family law. Derek wore a charcoal gray suit and an expression of concerned determination. Next to him sat Amber, looking appropriately supportive and maternal in a conservative dress and cardigan. I took my seat at the respondent's table and tried not to think about the fact that my children's future was about to be decided by legal arguments and carefully presented evidence. This wasn't just a custody dispute. It was a battle for the fundamental right to remain Tyler and Chloe's mother in any meaningful sense. When Judge Patricia Winters entered the courtroom, I felt a complex mix of relief and anxiety. She looked exactly as I remembered, graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, an air of quiet authority that filled the room. She took her seat behind the bench without making eye contact with either party, her expression neutral and professional. "Good morning," she said, reviewing the file before her. "This is a petition for modification of custody filed by Derek Hamilton against Natalie Brooks. Counsel, are you ready to proceed?" Derek's lawyer stood first. "Yes, Your Honor. Rebecca Hayes representing the petitioner." Marcus rose beside me. "Marcus Rivera representing the respondent, Your Honor." Judge Winters nodded. "Ms. Hayes, you may present your opening statement." What followed was a masterful presentation of Derek's case. Rebecca Hayes painted a picture of a successful, stable man who had found love again and was ready to provide his children with opportunities their current situation couldn't offer. She talked about excellent schools in Phoenix, about Amber's successful nursing career, about the advantages of a two-parent household with substantial combined income. Then she turned to me, and her tone shifted subtly. "Your Honor, while we don't question Ms. Brooks's love for her children, We do have concerns about her ability to provide the stability and support they need during these crucial developmental years. Since the divorce, Ms. Brooks has been struggling financially and emotionally. She lives in a small apartment, works sporadically from home, and has shown signs of depression and anxiety that the children have noticed and mentioned to their father. She presented Derek's evidence methodically. My modest income compared to Derek and Amber's combined earnings. The children's comments about my mood, taken out of context and presented as concerning patterns. My living situation, framed as inadequate rather than cozy. My work-from-home schedule, described as isolation rather than flexibility. The children themselves have expressed excitement about the opportunities awaiting them in Phoenix. Rebecca continued. They're looking forward to having a stable home with both a father and stepmother who can provide consistent support and guidance. Mr. Hamilton is not seeking to eliminate Ms. Brooks from the children's lives, but rather to ensure that their primary residence is in the home that can best serve their needs. When she sat down, I felt like I'd been systematically dismantled. Every aspect of my life since the divorce had been reframed as evidence of inadequacy. The fact that I'd been rebuilding and healing was presented as ongoing instability. My love for Tyler and Chloe was acknowledged but deemed insufficient. Marcus stood for our opening statement, and I held my breath. This was our chance to present the other side of the story, to show the court who I really was and what Derek had been doing. Your Honor, Marcus began, this case is not really about relocation or opportunities or even the children's best interests. This case is about a father who has decided that shared custody is inconvenient for his new life and who is engaged in a systematic campaign to alienate his children from their mother in order to justify taking them away from her. He outlined our defense methodically. My consistent income and growing business, the children's happiness and stability in my care, their academic and social success, the strong relationships I'd maintained with their teachers and friends' parents. He presented letters of support, evidence of my involvement in their lives, documentation of their well-being under my care. Most importantly, Marcus said, we have evidence that Mr. Hamilton has been engaging in parental alienation, coaching the children to see problems with their mother that don't exist, and manipulating their responses to create a false narrative of concern. Ms. Brooks has been recording their conversations about the children, and these recordings reveal a pattern of manipulation and emotional abuse designed to undermine the children's relationship with their mother. When Marcus sat down, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted. The question was no longer just whether Derek could provide better opportunities, but whether his methods of pursuing those opportunities constituted emotional harm to the children. Rebecca Hayes called Derek as her first witness, and he presented beautifully. Calm, articulate, genuinely concerned about his children's welfare. He talked about the opportunities in Phoenix, about Amber's positive influence on Tyler and Chloe, about his concerns for my emotional stability and financial security. I don't want to take the children away from their mother, Derek said, looking directly at Judge Winters. But I do want to provide them with the best possible foundation for their futures. The opportunities in Phoenix, combined with the stability of a two-parent household, would give them advantages they simply can't have in their current situation. When Marcus cross-examined Derek, the facade began to crack slightly. Marcus played selected portions of the recorded conversations, asking Derek to explain his comments about my mental stability, his leading questions to the children, his suggestions that I was inadequate as a mother. Mr. Hamilton, Marcus said, in this recording from 3 weeks ago, you told Ms. Brooks that Tyler had expressed concern about her crying. Can you tell the court exactly what Tyler said? Derek shifted in his seat. He mentioned that his mother seemed sad sometimes. Did he say he was concerned, or did you ask him if he was concerned? I may have asked him about it. And when you asked him if he was concerned, what did you say exactly? Derek's lawyer objected, but Judge Winters allowed the question. Derek looked uncomfortable. I asked if he thought his mom seemed different lately. Different how? Just different. More emotional. Marcus played another recording. Derek's voice filled the courtroom. Tyler, have you noticed that Mom cries more than she used to? Do you think that's normal? Are you worried about her? The effect on the courtroom was immediate. Derek's concern was revealed as leading questions, designed to plant worry in Tyler's mind. Judge Winters took notes, her expression unreadable. Marcus continued the cross-examination, using the recordings to demonstrate how Derek had systematically coached the children to view me negatively. With each example, Derek's claims of genuine concern became less credible. When it was my turn to testify, I felt strangely calm. This was my chance to tell my side of the story, to show the court who I really was rather than who Derek claimed I was. Marcus walked me through my life since the divorce, my therapy sessions and personal growth, my successful freelance business, my involvement in Tyler and Chloe's schools and activities. I talked about our weekend adventures, our evening homework, sessions, our bedtime routines. I painted a picture of a loving, stable home where two children were thriving despite the challenges of divorce. Ms. Brooks, Marcus said, have you been struggling with depression or anxiety as Mr. Hamilton has suggested? I went through a difficult adjustment period after the divorce, I answered honestly. Any major life change involves grief and uncertainty. I sought therapy to help me process those feelings and develop healthy coping strategies. Tyler and Chloe were aware that I was sad sometimes, but I always reassured them that my feelings weren't their responsibility and that I was getting help to feel better. Have you ever felt unable to care for your children? Never. Even during my most difficult days, Tyler and Chloe were my priority. They were fed, safe, loved, and supported. My sadness didn't interfere with my ability to parent them effectively. When Rebecca Hayes cross-examined me, she tried to poke holes in my testimony. She questioned my income, my living situation, my emotional stability. But I answered each question calmly and honestly, refusing to be defensive or apologetic about the choices I'd made. Ms. Brooks, she said, don't you think Tyler and Chloe would benefit from the increased opportunities and stability that Mr. Hamilton can provide in Phoenix? I think Tyler and Chloe benefit most from having both parents actively involved in their lives, I replied. Material advantages don't replace the importance of maintaining strong relationships with both parents. If Derek moves to Phoenix with the children, I become a visitor in their lives rather than their mother. The most powerful moment came when Marcus played the recording of Derek's most damaging comments. The courtroom listened in silence as Derek's voice filled the space. Maybe the truth is that some people just aren't cut out for this. Maybe the truth is that Tyler and Chloe would be better off in a stable home with two parents who can provide for them properly. You've been their mother. But lately I'm not sure you've been a very good one. Judge Winters stopped taking notes and looked directly at Derek. In that moment, I knew she'd heard what I'd been trying to tell everyone for months. Derek wasn't a concerned father worried about his children's welfare. He was a man who had decided I was expendable and was willing to destroy my relationship with Tyler and Chloe to get what he wanted. After both sides had presented their cases and called their witnesses, Judge Winters called for a recess. I'll need some time to review the evidence and testimony before rendering my decision, she said. Court will reconvene at 2 p.m. During the break, I sat in the hallway with Marcus, too nervous to eat the sandwich he'd brought me. How do you think it went? I asked. The recordings were powerful, he said. They clearly demonstrate parental alienation. But Judge Winters is thorough. She'll consider all the evidence before making her decision. When court reconvened, Judge Winters looked serious as she began to speak. This case involves fundamental questions about what constitutes the best interests of children in a custody dispute. The court has carefully considered the evidence presented by both parties, including testimony, documentation, and recorded conversations between the parents. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone in the courtroom could hear it. Mr. Hamilton has presented compelling evidence about the opportunities available to Tyler and Chloe in Phoenix, Judge Winters continued. Better schools, increased financial stability, and a two-parent household are all factors that could benefit the children's development. I felt my hope beginning to crumble. However, she said, and my breath caught. The court is deeply troubled by the evidence of parental alienation presented by Ms. Brooks. The recorded conversations clearly demonstrate a pattern of manipulation, designed to undermine the children's relationship with their mother. Mr. Hamilton's comments about Ms. Brooks's fitness as a parent go far beyond legitimate concern and cross into emotional abuse. Derek's face had gone pale. Parental alienation is a form of child abuse, Judge Winters said firmly. When one parent systematically undermines a child's relationship with the other parent, they are causing psychological harm that can have lasting effects. The court cannot and will not reward such behavior by granting the relief requested. She looked directly at Derek. Mr. Hamilton, your petition for custody modification is denied. Furthermore, the court is ordering mandatory co-parenting counseling for both parties, and any future attempts to relocate the children will require clear and convincing evidence that such a move is in their best interests and will not interfere with Ms. Brooks's parental relationship. The relief that washed over me was so intense I almost couldn't breathe. Tyler and Chloe would stay in Portland. They would continue to live with me, to be part of my daily life, to grow up knowing that their mother had fought for them and won. But Judge Winters wasn't finished. Ms. Brooks, she said, turning to me, the court recognizes that you have been the victim of parental alienation and that your children may have been influenced by Mr. Hamilton's comments about you. The court is recommending family therapy to help repair any damage to your relationship with Tyler and Chloe, and to help them understand that both parents love them and want what's best for them. As we filed out of the courtroom, Derek wouldn't meet my eyes. Amber looked stunned, as if she couldn't believe their carefully laid plans had crumbled so completely. Rebecca Hayes was already talking to them in hushed tones about their options for appeal. Outside the courthouse, Marcus shook my hand and smiled. Congratulations, Natalie. You fought hard for your kids, and you won. But I knew the real victory wasn't just the court's decision. It was the fact that I'd refused to let Derek's manipulation define me or my worth as a mother. I'd stood up for myself and for my children, even when it meant exposing painful truths about my struggles and vulnerabilities. That evening, when Tyler and Chloe came home from Derek's house for what I now knew would be one of many nights to come, they seemed confused and subdued. Derek had undoubtedly told them about the court decision, probably framing it in a way that made me seem like the obstacle to their happiness. Mom, Tyler said as I was making dinner, Dad said we're not moving to Phoenix anymore. That's right, honey. The judge decided that it would be better for you to stay here in Portland, close to both me and your dad. But what about the big rooms and the new school? I knelt down to Tyler's eye level, the same way I had months ago when this whole ordeal began. Tyler, I know your dad and Amber told you about all the exciting things waiting for you in Phoenix. And those things probably did sound wonderful. But there are wonderful things here too. Your friends, your school, your soccer team, your family. Sometimes the best opportunities are the ones we already have. Chloe looked up from her coloring book. Are you still sad, Mom? The question broke my heart and filled it simultaneously. Sometimes I'm sad, sweetie. Everyone feels sad sometimes. But I'm not too sad to take care of you, and I'm definitely not too sad to love you more than anything in the whole world. Over the following weeks, as we settled back into our routine, I began to see the subtle ways Derek's manipulation had affected Tyler and Chloe. They were more guarded with me, more likely to question my decisions, more prone to comparing our home unfavorably to Derek and Amber's. The family therapy Judge Winters had recommended became crucial in helping us rebuild the trust and security Derek had systematically undermined. but children are resilient, and love is powerful. Gradually, Tyler stopped watching me for signs of instability. Chloe stopped mentioning how much better things were at Dad's house. They began to relax back into being kids rather than unwitting spies reporting on my adequacy as a mother. 3 months after the court hearing, I received a brief email from Derek. He and Amber had decided to stay in Portland after all. Amber had found a position at a local hospital, and they'd realized that maintaining his relationship with Tyler and Chloe was more important than pursuing opportunities in Phoenix. I didn't believe for a second that Derek had suddenly developed a deeper appreciation for fatherhood. More likely, the court's harsh words about parental alienation had scared him into recognizing that his tactics could backfire spectacularly. Whatever his reasons, I was glad Tyler and Chloe would continue to have both parents nearby. The real transformation came 6 months later, during one of our regular weekend adventures. We were hiking in Forest Park, something we'd done dozens of times before, when Chloe slipped her small hand into mine. "Mom," she said, "I'm glad we didn't move to Phoenix." "Why's that, sweetheart?" The phone call that would change everything came on a rainy Thursday morning in October, almost 8 months after the custody hearing. I was in my home office, working on a logo design for a local restaurant, when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something compelled me to answer. "Ms. Brooks, this is Jennifer Walsh from the Oregon State Bar Association. I'm calling regarding a complaint that's been filed against Judge Patricia Winters." My stomach dropped. "A complaint? What kind of complaint?" "I can't discuss the specifics over the phone, but I need to ask you about your prior relationship with Judge Winters. Our records show that you worked together at Hartwell & Associates approximately 15 years ago." The room suddenly felt too small. "Yes, we were law partners briefly." "Is this about my custody case?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, but we may need to interview you as part of our investigation. Would you be available to come to our offices next week?" After I hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen, unable to focus on the cheerful restaurant logo I'd been designing. Derek had figured out my connection to Patricia Winters, and he was challenging the custody decision on grounds of judicial bias. The victory I'd thought was secure suddenly felt precarious. I called Marcus immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed his number. "Natalie, slow down," he said after I'd breathlessly explained the call. "Let's not panic. Even if Derek discovered your prior relationship with Judge Winters, that doesn't automatically invalidate her decision. The question is whether that relationship created an unfair advantage that affected the outcome." But it did affect the outcome, didn't it? Patricia knew me, knew my character. That had to influence how she viewed Derek's accusations. "That's exactly what we can't say," Marcus warned. "If you acknowledge that Judge Winters' prior knowledge of you influenced her decision, you're essentially admitting to judicial bias. We need to be very careful about how we handle this." The state bar investigation moved slowly, but its presence cast a shadow over everything. Derek had hired a new lawyer, one who specialized in judicial misconduct cases, and they were systematically building an argument that the custody decision was tainted by Patricia's undisclosed relationship with me. The irony was bitter. Derek, who had engaged in months of documented manipulation and emotional abuse toward our children, was now positioning himself as the victim of an unfair legal process. He was arguing that his carefully orchestrated campaign of parental alienation should be overlooked because the judge who ruled against him had once worked with me. During my interview with the state bar investigators, I tried to present the facts as clearly as possible without appearing defensive. "Did you know that Judge Winters would be presiding over your custody case before the hearing?" asked the lead investigator, a stern woman in her 50s named Barbara Chen. "No. I only learned about the assignment when I reviewed the court docket a few days before the hearing." "Did you inform your attorney about your prior relationship with Judge Winters?" "Yes, I discussed it with Marcus Rivera. We considered whether to request a different judge, but decided that our relationship was too distant and professional to constitute a conflict of interest. Did you believe that Judge Winters' knowledge of your character would give you an advantage in the case? This was the crucial question, the one that could determine whether Patricia's decision would stand. I chose my words carefully. I believed that Judge Winters would be fair and impartial, as she was throughout her career as an attorney and has been on the bench. My prior knowledge of her professional reputation gave me confidence in the integrity of the judicial process, not in any personal advantage. The investigation dragged on for weeks, during which Derek's behavior toward Tyler and Chloe shifted noticeably. He was more careful about direct criticism of me, but he began sharing his version of events about the unfair custody hearing. Tyler came home one evening looking confused and troubled. "Mom, Dad says the judge in our case wasn't supposed to make decisions about us because she knew you from before. Is that true?" I felt the familiar tightness in my chest that came whenever Derek found new ways to undermine my stability in our children's eyes. "The judge and I worked at the same law firm many years ago, before you were born. But judges are trained to be fair and make decisions based on evidence, not on personal relationships. Dad says that's why we didn't move to Phoenix, because the judge was your friend instead of being fair." This was Derek's new strategy. Since he couldn't directly attack my parenting without violating the court's warnings about alienation, he was attacking the process that had protected our family. He was teaching Tyler and Chloe to view the custody decision as illegitimate, which indirectly reinforced his original argument that they should have been living with him in Arizona. Tyler, the judge made her decision based on all the evidence in our case. She heard from both me and your dad, she listened to our lawyers, and she reviewed all the documents we presented. That's how the legal system works. But I could see the doubt in Tyler's eyes. Derek was once again placing him in the impossible position of having to choose between believing his father or trusting his mother. The difference this time was that Derek's claims had a grain of truth. Patricia and I did have a prior relationship, even if it was distant and professional. Chloe's confusion manifested differently. She asked me why grown-ups couldn't just agree about where kids should live, why there had to be judges and lawyers and investigations. Her 8-year-old mind couldn't grasp the complexity of what was happening, but she could sense that the adults in her life were once again fighting about her future. The strain of the investigation began to affect my daily life in ways I hadn't anticipated. I found myself second-guessing every interaction with Tyler and Chloe, wondering if Derek was coaching them to observe and report on my behavior. I became hyper-aware of my emotional reactions, afraid that any display of stress or frustration would be used as evidence of the instability Derek had always claimed to see. My work suffered as I struggled to concentrate on design projects while waiting for updates from the state bar. Clients began to notice delays in my deliverables, and I had to have uncomfortable conversations about timeline adjustments. The financial stability I'd worked so hard to build since the divorce was once again under threat. But the most painful aspect of Derek's new legal challenge was watching its effect on Tyler and Chloe's healing process. The progress we'd made in family therapy began to stall, as they were once again forced to navigate competing narratives about their parents and their family situation. Dr. Chen observed that both children were showing signs of renewed anxiety about their living arrangements. "They're afraid that someone might decide they have to move after all," she explained during one of our sessions. Derek's challenge to the custody decision has reactivated their fear of upheaval and change. 3 months into the investigation, I received another call from Jennifer Walsh at the state bar. "Ms. Brooks, we've completed our review of the allegations regarding Judge Winters. We found that while there was a prior professional relationship, that should have been disclosed. There's insufficient evidence that this relationship affected the outcome of your custody case. Judge Winters' decision was well supported by the evidence presented, particularly the recordings documenting parental alienation." The relief was overwhelming, but Jennifer wasn't finished. "However, Judge Winters has agreed to recuse herself from any future proceedings involving your case. If Mr. Hamilton chooses to appeal the custody decision or request further modifications, a different judge will be assigned." I thanked Jennifer and immediately called Marcus with the news. The state bar's finding meant that the custody decision would stand, but Derek still had the option to appeal through the normal court process. The good news is that appeals courts rarely overturn custody decisions unless there was a clear error in applying the law, Marcus explained. Derek would have to prove that Judge Winters ignored evidence or misapplied legal standards, which would be difficult given how thoroughly documented his alienation behavior was. But Derek surprised us all by choosing not to appeal. Instead, he requested a new hearing to modify the custody arrangement, citing changed circumstances related to his work schedule and Amber's career advancement. His new strategy was to present himself as a reformed parent who had learned from the custody battle and was now focused solely on Tyler and Chloe's best interests. The request for modification forced us back into the familiar rhythm of legal preparation, document gathering, and strategic planning. But this time, I approached the process with hard-won confidence rather than desperate fear. I had already proven that Derek's claims about my inadequacy were false. I had documentation of his manipulation tactics and evidence of the children's well-being in my care. More importantly, Tyler and Chloe themselves had grown stronger and more articulate about their own needs and preferences. The family therapy had given them tools to express their feelings about their living arrangements without feeling disloyal to either parent. During one of our preparation sessions, Marcus asked me how I felt about facing Derek in court again. "Different," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. The first time, I was fighting to prove I wasn't what Derek claimed I was. This time, I know who I am, and I'm not afraid of his accusations. The new custody hearing was scheduled for February, 14 months after our original court date. In the intervening time, Derek's travel schedule had indeed affected his consistency as a parent. He'd missed several visits due to work conflicts, had to reschedule others because of flight delays, and had struggled to maintain regular communication with Tyler and Chloe when he was out of town. Meanwhile, my freelance business had grown significantly. The restaurant logo I'd been working on during that first concerning phone call had led to a contract with a local marketing firm, which had resulted in steady subcontract work and a reliable income stream. I'd also started teaching design workshops at the community college, adding both income and professional credibility to my portfolio. Most importantly, Tyler and Chloe had continued to thrive. Tyler's grades had improved markedly since the stress of the custody battle had ended, and he'd been selected for his school's advanced math program. Chloe had joined the children's choir at our community center and had discovered a talent for singing that brought her obvious joy. But Derek's request for modification wasn't entirely without merit. Amber had indeed received a significant promotion, and their combined income now far exceeded what I could provide. They'd purchased a larger house with a pool and had enrolled in the country club where Tyler could take tennis lessons. Derek was offering material advantages that I couldn't match. The key difference this time was that material advantages were no longer the primary consideration. The court would be evaluating any proposed changes through the lens of what had happened during Derek's previous attempt to relocate the children. His pattern of manipulation and alienation would be part of the record, regardless of how reformed he claimed to be. Judge David Martinez, who had been assigned to our case after Patricia's recusal, was known for his careful attention to children's voices in custody decisions. Unlike some judges who relied primarily on expert testimony and parental arguments, Judge Martinez often interviewed children privately to understand their perspectives on proposed custody changes. This prospect both excited and worried me. Tyler and Chloe were old enough to express preferences about their living arrangements, but they were also still vulnerable to the kind of coaching and influence Derek had employed so effectively in the past. Dr. Chen worked with both children to prepare them for the possibility of speaking with the judge. She helped them understand that their job wasn't to choose between their parents, but to honestly express their feelings about their current living situation and any proposed changes. The judge wants to know how you feel, not what you think the right answer is, she explained to them during one session. There are no wrong feelings, and neither parent will be angry with you for being honest. Tyler, now 12 and increasingly mature, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. I just want to stay where I am, he told Dr. Chen. I like my school, my friends, my soccer team. I don't want to start over again somewhere else. Chloe's response was more emotional. I want to live with Mom, but I want Dad to be happy too. Why can't grown-ups just figure out how to make everyone happy? Her question highlighted the fundamental unfairness of putting children in the middle of adult conflicts. No child should have to worry about balancing their parents' happiness against their own needs, but divorce inevitably creates situations where children feel responsible for outcomes they can't control. 2 weeks before the hearing, Derek made an unexpected request. He asked if we could meet privately, without lawyers, to discuss the custody modification. Dr. Morton, our co-parenting counselor, offered to facilitate the conversation in his office. I was reluctant to agree, remembering how Derek had used our previous private conversations to gather ammunition for his legal arguments. But Marcus thought it might be beneficial to hear Derek's proposal directly and to gauge whether his approach had genuinely changed. The meeting took place on a cold Tuesday evening in Dr. Morton's downtown office. Derek arrived alone, without Amber, which surprised me. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before, with shadows under his eyes and a subdued manner that was very different from his usual confident presentation. Natalie, I want to thank you for agreeing to meet, he began, his voice lacking its typical authoritative tone. I know our communication has been difficult, and I take responsibility for my part in that. I waited, unsure where this was leading. The State Bar investigation was a wake-up call for me, Derek continued. I realized that in my effort to provide what I thought was best for Tyler and Chloe, I lost sight of what they actually needed. Dr. Morton encouraged Derek to be more specific. What do you think they needed that you weren't providing? Derek was quiet for a moment, seeming to struggle with the question. Stability, consistency, the ability to love both their parents without feeling like they were betraying one of us. I felt a flicker of hope that Derek might finally be acknowledging the damage his alienation tactics had caused, but I remained cautious. Derek was skilled at saying what he thought people wanted to hear. I'm not withdrawing my modification request, Derek said, but I want to propose a compromise. Instead of seeking primary custody, I'd like to request an equal parenting schedule. Week on, week off. Tyler and Chloe would spend equal time in both homes, with both parents. The proposal caught me off guard. Equal parenting time would mean giving up the primary custody arrangement that had provided stability for Tyler and Chloe over the past year. But it would also mean that they wouldn't be uprooted from Portland or separated from either parent. What about your travel schedule? I asked. How would equal parenting work when you're out of town for work? I've requested a transfer to a regional position that would eliminate most of my travel, Derek replied. It's a step back career-wise, but Amber and I have decided that being present for Tyler and Chloe is more important than professional advancement. Dr. Morton asked the question I was thinking. Derek, what's changed for you? Why is this important to you now? Derek's answer surprised me with its honesty. I talked to Tyler last week about school, just casual conversation about his classes and his friends, and I realized that I don't really know his daily life anymore. I know about his soccer games and his report cards, but I don't know which kids he sits with at lunch or what makes him laugh or what he worries about before he falls asleep. He paused, looking down at his hands. I've been so focused on providing opportunities and advantages that I forgot to just be his father. Same with Chloe. I know she likes to sing, but I've never heard her practice. I know she's artistic, but I haven't seen her recent drawings. The admission felt genuine, but I was still wary. Derek, equal parenting sounds reasonable in theory, but it requires a level of cooperation and communication that we've struggled to achieve. What makes you think it would work now? Because I'm not trying to win anymore, Derek said simply. I'm not trying to prove that I'm the better parent, or that you're inadequate. I just want to be Tyler and Chloe's father in a real way, not just during scheduled visits. Dr. Morton guided us through a discussion of the practical implications of equal parenting. School pickups, homework supervision, extracurricular activities, medical appointments, holiday schedules. The logistics were complex, but not insurmountable. The more we talked, the more I found myself cautiously optimistic about Derek's proposal. Equal parenting would mean more disruption for Tyler and Chloe, who had grown comfortable with our current routine. But it would also mean they could have meaningful relationships with both parents without anyone feeling like they were being cheated of time. I need to think about this, I told Derek as our meeting concluded. And I want to discuss it with Tyler and Chloe. This affects their daily lives more than anyone else's. Of course, Derek agreed. I'd actually like to talk to them about it too, if that's okay with you. Not to pressure them, but to hear their thoughts about the idea. That Derek was asking my permission to discuss the proposal with our children was itself a significant change from his previous approach. Previously, he would have presented his plans to Tyler and Chloe as exciting opportunities, coaching them to embrace whatever he wanted. Now he seemed genuinely interested in their input. I agreed to let Derek discuss the equal parenting proposal with Tyler and Chloe, with the understanding that Dr. Chen would also talk with them about it during our family therapy sessions. I wanted them to have multiple opportunities to process the idea and express any concerns. Tyler's initial reaction was pragmatic. Would we still go to the same schools? Would we still live in Portland? When I assured him that both of those things would remain the same, he seemed more open to the idea. It might be nice to see Dad more, he said, but I like living here most of the time. Would that change? Chloe's response was characteristically emotional. Does this mean Dad isn't mad at you anymore, Mom? Her question revealed how much the ongoing tension between Derek and me had affected her sense of security. Children are remarkably perceptive about adult relationships, and Chloe had clearly been carrying worry about the conflict between her parents. Your dad and I are learning to work together better, I told her carefully. We both want what's best for you and Tyler, and sometimes that means changing how we do things. Over the following week, I found myself genuinely considering Derek's proposal. Equal parenting would require me to trust him in ways I hadn't since before the original custody battle. But it would also give Tyler and Chloe something I couldn't provide on my own, the daily presence of their father. The decision ultimately came down to whether I believed Derek had genuinely changed or whether this was another sophisticated manipulation strategy. His acknowledgement of his past mistakes seemed real, but Derek had always been skilled at presenting himself in whatever light served his purposes. I decided to test his sincerity in a way that would reveal his true motivations. During our next co-parenting session with Dr. Morton, I presented Derek with a counter-proposal. I'm willing to consider equal parenting, I said, but with some conditions. All major decisions about Tyler and Chloe would require both parents' agreement. Neither of us could make unilateral choices about their education, medical care, or extracurricular activities. And if either of us violates the spirit of cooperative parenting, the other parent can request a return to the current arrangement. Derek's response would tell me everything I needed to know about his intentions. If he was genuinely committed to shared parenting, he would welcome the accountability and cooperation my conditions required. If he was still seeking control and advantage, he would resist any limits on his parental authority. Derek considered my proposal for several minutes before responding. Those conditions seem fair, he said. Actually, they seem necessary. We haven't been good at making decisions together in the past, so having a structure for cooperation makes sense. His acceptance of my conditions surprised me, but I wasn't ready to trust completely. Derek, I need to be clear about something. If we move to equal parenting and you try to use that arrangement to undermine my relationship with Tyler and Chloe again, I will fight to return to primary custody. The court has already found evidence of parental alienation. I won't tolerate it a second time. I understand, Derek said. And I don't want to go back to that kind of conflict. It wasn't good for any of us, especially Tyler and Chloe. Dr. Morton spent the remainder of our session helping us outline the practical details of equal parenting. Which parent would have, the children on which weeks, how we would handle transitions, what would happen when someone needed to travel for work or family emergencies. By the time we left Dr. Morton's office, we had the framework for a cooperative parenting arrangement that could give Tyler and Chloe the stability of staying in Portland while also providing them with meaningful time with both parents. But I knew that frameworks and good intentions weren't enough. The real test would come in the daily implementation of shared parenting, in the hundreds of small decisions and interactions that would determine whether Derek and I could truly cooperate in raising our children. As I drove home that evening, I felt cautiously hopeful about the future for the first time in over a year. Not the desperate hope that comes from fighting for survival, but the quiet optimism that emerges when you begin to believe that healing and growth are possible. Tyler and Chloe were waiting for me when I got home, full of questions about the Yao meeting with their father. I could see in their faces the same cautious hope I was feeling. They wanted to believe that their parents could work together, that the conflict and tension that had defined their family life for so long might finally be ending. "Mom," Chloe asked as I tucked her into bed, "do you think Dad really wants to be better at being a dad?" "I think he does, sweetie. But wanting to change and actually changing are different things. We'll have to see if his actions match his words. What if they don't? Then we'll handle that too. You and Tyler and I have gotten pretty good at handling difficult things together." Chloe smiled and snuggled deeper into her blankets. "I like our family the way it is now, but it might be nice if Dad could be part of it more without making everyone upset." As I turned off her light and closed her door, I carried her words with me. Maybe that was what we were all really hoping for, a way for Derek to be more present as a father, without destabilizing the family we'd worked so hard to rebuild. The custody modification hearing was still scheduled for February, but now it would be a collaborative presentation of our agreed-upon parenting plan rather than an adversarial battle. The judge would still need to approve our arrangement and ensure that it served Tyler and Chloe's best interests, but the tenor of the proceedings would be entirely different. I had learned through this entire ordeal that sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your opponent, but finding a way to transform opposition into cooperation. Derek and I might never be friends, but we could potentially be effective co-parents if we both remained committed to putting Tyler and Chloe's needs ahead of our own egos and grievances. Time would tell whether Derek's apparent transformation was genuine, or whether this was simply a more sophisticated version of his manipulation tactics. But I was no longer the frightened, defensive mother who had been caught off guard by his initial custody challenge. I was stronger now, more confident in my own worth and capabilities, better equipped to protect my children from harm, while also advocating for their relationships with both parents. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew that Tyler, Chloe, and I could face them together. We had already survived the worst Derek could throw at us. Everything else would be manageable in comparison. The February hearing arrived with an unexpected sense of calm. Instead of the anxiety and dread that had consumed me before the original custody battle, I felt centered and prepared. Marcus and I sat at our familiar table in the courthouse, but this time Derek's lawyer, Rebecca Hayes, wasn't there. Derek had chosen to represent himself for this modification request, a decision that spoke to the collaborative nature of our proposal. Judge David Martinez reviewed our joint parenting plan with careful attention to detail. He asked pointed questions about logistics, conflict resolution procedures, and how we plan to handle disagreements about the children's needs. Derek and I answered his questions in turn, demonstrating the communication skills we'd developed through months of co-parenting counseling. "Mr. Hamilton," Judge Martinez said, "your original petition requested relocation to Phoenix and primary custody. Now you're proposing equal parenting time with Ms. Brooks remaining the primary residential parent for school purposes. What prompted this significant change in your position?" Derek took a breath before answering, and I could see him choosing his words carefully. "Your Honor, I realized that my previous focus on what I thought would benefit Tyler and Chloe wasn't necessarily aligned with what they actually needed. They needed stability, consistency, and the ability to maintain strong relationships with both parents. This arrangement provides all of those things." Judge Martinez turned to me. "Ms. Brooks, you've agreed to significantly reduce your parenting time from the current arrangement. What assurances do you have that this modification will serve the children's best interests?" "Your Honor, Tyler and Chloe have expressed genuine enthusiasm about spending more time with their father. They've also been clear that they want to remain in Portland with their current schools and friends. This arrangement allows them to have both. Additionally, Mr. Hamilton and I have developed better communication tools through counseling, and we've agreed to continue that work." The judge spent considerable time reviewing the documentation we'd provided, letters from Tyler and Chloe's teachers confirming their academic and social progress, reports from Dr. Chen about their emotional well-being, even statements from the parents of their friends supporting the stability they'd found in Portland. But the most compelling evidence came from Tyler and Chloe themselves. Judge Martinez had interviewed them privately the week before, and while I wasn't privy to the details of those conversations, their comfort with the proposed arrangement was clear. "Based on my review of the evidence and my conversations with Tyler and Chloe," Judge Martinez said, "I'm approving the modified parenting plan with some additional provisions. Both parents will continue co-parenting counseling for at least 6 months. Any changes to this arrangement will require mediation before court intervention, and I'm appointing a guardian ad litem to check in with the children quarterly for the first year to ensure this transition is serving their best interests." The gavel came down with a sense of finality that felt different from the original. Custody decision. This wasn't the end of a battle, but the beginning of a new chapter in our family's story. Outside the courthouse, Derek approached me with an expression I'd never seen before. Humble, almost tentative. "Natalie, I know I have a lot to make up for with Tyler and Chloe, and with you. I hope this arrangement gives me the chance to do that." I studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd grown so skilled at detecting. But what I saw was something that looked like genuine remorse mixed with determination. "Derek, this only works if we both commit to putting Tyler and Chloe first. Not our egos, not our grievances, not our new relationships. Just them." "I understand. And I'm grateful you're giving me this opportunity." The first few weeks of our new arrangement were awkward but functional. Tyler and Chloe moved between households with the kind of careful politeness children adopt when they're not sure how permanent a situation might be. They packed and unpacked their belongings with meticulous attention, as if afraid that forgetting something might upset the delicate balance we'd achieved. Derek was almost overly attentive. During those early weeks, clearly trying to demonstrate his commitment to being a present and engaged father. He attended every soccer practice, helped with homework assignments he'd never shown interest in before, and made elaborate plans for weekend activities during his parenting time. The real test came 6 weeks into our new routine when Tyler came down with strep throat during Derek's week. In the past, Derek might have used such an illness as evidence that I was somehow responsible or as an excuse to criticize my care. Instead, he called me immediately. "Tyler's running a fever and his throat is really sore. I'm taking him to urgent care, but I wanted you to know. Should I pick up Chloe from school early so she's not exposed?" The consultation was so natural, so focused on practical problem solving rather than blame or defensiveness that it caught me off guard. Yes, that's probably smart. And can you text me what the doctor says? I'll pick up his prescription if it's closer to my office. Already planned on it. Thanks, Natalie. That brief conversation marked a turning point in our co-parenting relationship. We began communicating about Tyler and Chloe's needs without the layers of suspicion and resentment that had previously complicated every interaction. It wasn't friendship, but it was functional cooperation. The children responded to this change in ways both obvious and subtle. Tyler stopped asking careful questions about whether it was okay to enjoy time at his father's house. Chloe stopped, reporting on Derek's activities as if she needed to reassure me that he was being appropriate. They began to relax into the rhythm of moving between homes, treating it as a normal part of their lives rather than a source of anxiety. But the most significant change was in Derek himself. During one of our quarterly co-parenting sessions, with Dr. Morton, he brought up something that surprised me. "I've been thinking about the recordings Natalie made of our conversations," he said. "I listened to them again recently, and I was shocked by how I sounded. I genuinely believed I was being a concerned father, but hearing my own voice, I can understand how manipulative and hurtful those comments were." Dr. Morton encouraged Derek to elaborate. "What do you hear now that you didn't hear then?" "I hear someone trying to control a situation by undermining another person. I hear someone more concerned with being right than with actually helping his children. I hear someone who was scared of losing and chose to fight dirty rather than address that fear honestly." I felt something shift inside me as Derek spoke. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that perhaps people could genuinely change when forced to confront the consequences of their actions. "Derek," I said carefully, "what I needed then, and what I still need now, is for you to understand that your words had real consequences." Tyler and Chloe started doubting me, questioning my competence, feeling responsible for my emotional well-being. That kind of damage takes time to heal. I know. And I see how hard you've worked to rebuild their trust and security. I'm not asking you to forget what I did, but I hope I can earn the chance to prove I've learned from it. Dr. Morton guided us through a discussion about rebuilding trust between co-parents, emphasizing that trust is rebuilt through consistent actions over time, not through apologies or promises. "Derek, what specific behaviors will you commit to that demonstrate respect for Natalie's role as Tyler and Chloe's mother?" Dr. Morton asked. Derek's answer was immediate and specific. "I won't ask them leading questions about Natalie's parenting. I won't make comparisons between our households. I won't put them in the position of having to choose loyalty between us. And if I have concerns about their well-being, I'll address them directly with Natalie rather than trying to gather evidence through the children." The specificity of his commitments impressed me. These weren't vague promises to do better, but concrete behavioral changes that addressed the exact tactics he'd used to manipulate Tyler and Chloe's perceptions of me. Spring brought new challenges and new successes. Tyler made the varsity soccer team as an 8th grader, an achievement that required both Derek and me to coordinate transportation to practices and games. Instead of competing over who could be more supportive, we naturally divided responsibilities based on our schedules and proximity. Chloe's interest in music continued to flourish, and she expressed interest in taking piano lessons. The cost was significant enough that Derek and I needed to discuss how to handle it. In the past, such a conversation would have become a battlefield about financial responsibility and parenting priorities. This time, we simply worked out a plan that allowed Chloe to pursue her passion while sharing the financial burden appropriately. But the most meaningful moment came during Tyler's championship soccer game in May. Derek and I found ourselves sitting together on the sidelines, both wearing his team colors, both cheering enthusiastically for his plays. When Tyler scored the winning goal in the final minutes, Derek and I spontaneously high-fived each other before we even realized what we were doing. After the game, As Tyler basked in the congratulations of his teammates and the celebration of his victory, he looked over at Derek and me standing together and smiled in a way I hadn't seen since before our divorce. Not the careful, guarded smile he'd worn during the custody battle, but the open, joyful expression of a child who felt secure in his parents' love and support. "Mom, Dad," he called out, "did you see that goal?" "We saw it," Derek and I answered, almost in unison, and Tyler's grin widened even further. Later that evening, as I was helping Chloe with her bedtime routine, she made an observation that stayed with me for weeks. "Mom, you and Dad seem different now, like you're both happier when you're around each other." "What do you mean, sweetie?" "Before, when you and Dad talked, you both looked worried or mad. Now you just look like regular grown-ups talking about regular stuff." Her insight was remarkable. Derek and I weren't friends, and we would never go back to being a married couple, but we had become something more valuable. Effective co-parents who could focus on our children's needs without being derailed by our own emotional baggage. The 1-year anniversary of our modified custody arrangement passed without fanfare, but it marked a significant milestone. The guardian ad litem filed her final report with the court, noting that Tyler and Chloe were thriving academically, socially, and emotionally. Their teachers reported no behavioral concerns, their grades remained excellent, and they spoke positively about both households during their check-in interviews. Dr. Chen formally concluded our family therapy sessions, noting that Tyler and Chloe had successfully processed the trauma of the custody battle and developed healthy coping strategies for navigating their family structure. "They understand that their parents' divorce doesn't reflect any deficiency in them," Dr. Chen explained. "During our final session, they've learned to express their needs clearly to both parents, and they're comfortable moving between households without feeling like they have to hide parts of themselves." But perhaps the most significant change was in my own relationship with conflict and advocacy. The custody battle had taught me that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, more capable of fighting for what mattered than I'd given myself credit for. I no longer approached disagreements with Derek from a position of defensiveness or fear, but from a place of confidence in my own worth and capabilities. This newfound strength extended beyond co-parenting into other areas of my life. When a client tried to pressure me into accepting unfair payment terms, I calmly but firmly negotiated better conditions. When Tyler's school proposed moving him to a different math class without consulting me, I advocated effectively for keeping him in the advanced program where he was thriving. The woman who had once allowed Derek to manipulate her children's perceptions of her competence was gone, replaced by someone who understood her own value and refused to accept treatment that suggested otherwise. On a warm evening in September, nearly 2 years after the original custody hearing, Derek asked if we could have coffee to discuss Tyler's high school applications. It was a conversation that would have been fraught with tension and competition in the past, but now felt like a natural collaboration between two parents invested in their son's future. We met at a cafe near Tyler's school, and as we reviewed different high school options and discussed Tyler's interests and strengths, I realized how much our relationship had evolved. We were discussing our son's future with mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine collaboration. "Natalie," Derek said as we were finishing our coffee, "I want to say something I should have said a long time ago. I'm sorry, not just for the custody battle, but for all the ways I tried to undermine your confidence as a mother. You didn't deserve that, and Tyler and Chloe certainly didn't deserve to be put in the middle of it." The apology was direct, specific, and seemingly genuine. But more importantly, it was backed by 2 years of changed behavior that demonstrated Derek understood the impact of his past actions. "Thank you," I said simply. "I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate the work you've done to rebuild trust with Tyler and Chloe. They're lucky to have a father who was willing to examine his mistakes and change his behavior. They're lucky to have a mother who fought to protect them and then had the grace to give me a second chance." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. The terrified woman who had received Derek's first call about Phoenix felt like a different person entirely. That woman had been fighting for survival, desperate to prove she wasn't the inadequate mother Derek claimed she was. This woman knew exactly who she was. A mother who would do anything to protect her children. A professional who had built a successful business through talent and determination. A person who had survived betrayal and manipulation and emerged stronger on the other side. Tyler and Chloe were waiting for me when I got home, full of questions about the high school discussion and excited about the possibilities ahead. As we sat around the kitchen table looking at brochures and websites, I felt the deep contentment that comes from knowing you've successfully navigated something that could have destroyed your family. "Mom," Chloe said as we were cleaning up the materials, "I'm glad you and Dad figured out how to be nice to each other." "Me too, sweetie. It's much better for everyone when families can work together, even when they're structured differently than they used to be." Tyler looked up. From the brochure he was still reading. "I think we're actually a pretty good family now. Different than before, but good." His assessment was perfect. We were indeed a good family now, just configured differently than we'd originally planned. Derek and Amber had their household, I had mine, and Tyler and Chloe moved freely between both, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and wanted in each place. The custody battle that had threatened to tear us apart had ultimately forced us to examine our priorities and develop better ways of communicating and cooperating. Derek had been compelled to confront his manipulative behaviors and develop genuine parenting skills. I had discovered reserves of strength and advocacy I hadn't known I possessed. Most importantly, Tyler and Chloe had learned that families could survive major changes and emerge stronger, that conflict could be resolved through honest communication and compromise, and that their well-being would always be their parents' top priority. As I tucked Chloe into bed that night, she asked me one final question that perfectly captured the transformation our family had undergone. "Mom, do you think everything worked out the way it was supposed to?" I considered her question carefully. The path we'd taken to reach this point had been painful and difficult, marked by betrayal, legal battles, and emotional trauma that could have been avoided if Derek had chosen different tactics from the beginning. But the family we'd become through navigating those challenges was stronger, more honest, and more resilient than the one we'd been before. Tyler and Chloe had learned to advocate for themselves, to communicate their needs clearly, and to trust that their parents would prioritize their well-being even when making difficult decisions. "I think everything worked out the way it needed to," I told her. "Sometimes the best outcomes come from the hardest journeys." She smiled and snuggled deeper into her blankets. "I love our family, Mom. All of it." "I love our family too, sweetheart. Sweet dreams." As I turned off her light and walked toward my own room, I carried her words with me. Our family wasn't traditional, and our path to stability hadn't been smooth, but we had indeed created something worth loving and protecting. The recordings that had saved our custody case were now stored away, no longer needed as evidence, but preserved as a reminder of how far we'd come. The woman who had made those recordings in desperation and fear had evolved into someone who approached challenges with confidence and clarity. Derek's transformation from manipulative adversary to cooperative co-parent had taken time and professional intervention, but it demonstrated that people could genuinely change when motivated by love for their children and accountability for their actions. Most importantly, Tyler and Chloe had not only survived their parents' divorce and custody battle, but had thrived in the family structure we'd ultimately created. They were confident, articulate, academically successful, and emotionally secure. Young people who understood that families could take many forms while still providing love, support, and stability. The judge who had been my former law partner had unknowingly set in motion a series of events that tested every assumption about fairness, justice, and family dynamics. But the real verdict had been delivered not in a courtroom, but in the daily. Choices Derek and I made to prioritize our children's well-being over our own egos and grievances. Justice, it turned out, wasn't about winning or losing a legal battle. It was about creating a family structure where children could flourish, parents could grow, and relationships could heal from even the deepest wounds. And in that measure, we had achieved something far more valuable than any court victory could have provided. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.